Thank you very much for inviting me to this opportunity to speak to a lot of people, and thank you for tuning in. So I'll be speaking a bit about what's happening at the European level, a few proposals that are relevant for the sector, some developments on the national level that concern us, and then maybe a bigger question that actually also ties into your where will the sector be in 2013 discussion, which I think is very 2030, which is very far away still, but I think it's also about the future. So these are the three topics I want to deal with. And maybe very shortly something about EGBA. We're a Brussels-based trade organization. We represent only online gambling operators. They're all established in the EU and have license in the EU. We have 5 members: Bet365, GVC, Betson, Kindred, and William Hill, and together they represent more or less 25% of the European market. So what we do, we speak on behalf of the industry with governments, both here in Brussels or the EU, but also national governments. We promote leadership and raising standards. That's something that I would like to emphasize. I think the industry needs to catch up and improve its game and its workings. We also encourage industry cooperation and a better representation of the industry. For instance, with the COVID crisis, we, together with 14 national associations, issued a joint statement on responsible gambling. And we try to be a source of information about the gambling sector to the outside world, so to media and governments as well. And the reason is that we think it would be good to be more transparent and to share more about the industry with the outside world so that people get more knowledge of who we are as an industry and what we do. So let me then touch upon a number of issues I think that are relevant. There are many more, but I will highlight a few. So first I will deal with 2 topics on the European level that is relevant for the sector. The first one is anti-money laundering. I think Enrico of iGaming discussed it last week as well. Money laundering is a very hot topic, not just in Malta, but all across Europe. And we have a set of rules that applies also to online gambling. But the enforcement of it is not going well, and it's not going well in many countries around Europe. So it's not something particular for Malta or one country, but in general. So the European Commission is now looking at ways of improving the way that the rules will be enforced, and they probably will come up with a new proposal either at the end of this year or the beginning of next year, which will really shake up the way that the rules are being enforced. So it might also actually include a number of improvements of the current or changes to the current rules, but they will stay as expected, probably more or less the same. But the way that the enforcement will take place will be probably different, more centralized, more harmonized, and more cooperation. And that's obviously very relevant for the sector. We don't have the proposal yet. The proposal is not out, but that's something that I think the sector needs to be aware of. And secondly, the second topic I would like to raise is the discussion around the digital tax. Now, the digital tax originally was an idea to tax a number of big multinationals, mostly American companies, because they make business in Europe, but they are not established here. And a lot of countries find that they do not pay sufficient taxation. So that's the background about the digital tax, but it has become a much wider in its scope. Probably, again, we have a few national governments that already have a digital tax they've put on hold. Europe is now looking at introducing a digital tax, but the main discussions at this stage are at the OECD in Paris to get an agreement between the US, Europe, Japan, Korea, and a number of other countries as well. Whether this will work or not, I think is very much to be seen. But if it doesn't work on the OECD level, it's very likely that something will be proposed on the European level, also in view of the whole crisis, the corona crisis and economic lockdown that has been taking place. So a gaming tax, or not a gaming tax, I shouldn't call it a digital tax, is very likely to come, and it could potentially also include online gambling companies. Obviously, that's something that we are closely following and lobbying at, but something that the industry should be aware of as well. So that was the European level. Now, the national level, I think it's not a big surprise when I say that we are very much concerned about a number of very restrictive new legislations that are being introduced. I think yesterday Spain introduced or proposed some more advertising restrictions that are in line with those that already exist, very stringent advertising restrictions. I don't need to highlight what's happening in the UK, but that's also a very critical jurisdiction now. Stake limits, also in Germany, other member states. So overall, a lot of political pressure from governments, some of them previously very friendly to the sector, that are really putting pressure on the sector, and are actually really cutting into the ability of the sector to do business. And then I think on top of that, I think it's likely that a lot of economic sectors will be confronted with a potential increase in tax because of the corona crisis and the programs put in place to finance certain programs. So I think that's a very worrying trend or development that we see, especially at the national level. And that then brings me to my last point, which is where is the sector and where are we heading? And I think we can be very critical of the way that governments look upon the sector, but I think the sector also needs to be pretty critical on how we behave ourselves. We, as an industry, are not proactive enough. We're not organized enough, and I think we should do much better in that respect. If we want to have a sustainable future, we need to get organized, and we need to show that we want to be part of society. So we need to have much greater cooperation. That's also why we have come up with a code of conduct for advertising and a code of conduct for implementation of GDPR. And I think it's very important that the industry takes responsibility like this and that we mean it seriously. As an example, the advertising code of conduct that will be now applied by our members. It's also open for signature by other operators. And we have a few companies already having an interest. But when we mentioned that monitoring would be part of signing up to the code of conduct, we never heard back from a number of these operators. And I think that shows you where the industry probably still is at. On the one hand, we are increasingly aware that we need to take responsibility. On the other hand, these things are still seen to be a cost. Following through is not really done. And I think we need to, as a sector, do much better. So my main message, takeaway message at the end of my little 10-minute talk is that we need to take responsibility if we want to have a sustainable future for the sector rather than being marginalized. And this is something that we need to do quite urgently, because otherwise, I think the 2030 discussion that we will have at the end of this broadcast, we probably not even make it to 2013, because, I mean, it's looking increasingly difficult to do business. And if we want to improve, we as an industry must do better ourselves as well. So thank you very much. I leave it at this. If you have any questions, please do contact us at EGBA. And I'm looking forward to the rest of the discussion and hopefully a future opportunity to talk to you again.